Gromara versus Thaleia.
How's it going, everyone? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Gromara and Thaleias, and we're going to try to see if we can figure out which of these heroes is the best pair for Yun Ming. Now, I'm sure as all of you know, the new generation of mages came out this past season. We have Yun Ming and Gromara, and Yun Ming is just absolutely insane. Him and Gromara are an amazing pair. They deal so much more damage than the other pairs that we have. However, some of you may have noticed that a lot of people are choosing to pair Thaleia with them. And the reason for this is that Thaleia is actually very similar to Gromara in that she provides a lot of the same buffs that Gromara does. So today we're going to do a deep dive into both of these heroes' skills, the buffs that they provide, talent trees, and everything that you need to know in order to make a decision on which of these heroes you want to pair with Yun Ming. Now, a quick disclaimer before we start. I have no idea how the damage calculations and formulas work in Call of Dragons, so everything that I'm about to show you could be completely wrong. Now, I'm using common sense and basic math here, and I think that what I'm going to share with you today is still going to be very valuable and hopefully help you to come to your own conclusion about which of these heroes is going to be best for you. So we're going to start off by delving into both of these heroes' skills. So to make comparisons fair, we're going to be comparing Thaleia at a 5-1-1 build and Gromara at a 5-1-5-5 and fully awakened. There are a lot of recommendations to run her at 5-1-5-5 as a more minimal investment, but she really needs to be awakened to reach her full potential. So starting off with the rage damage, so Thaleia has a damage factor of 1600, Gromara at 5-1-5-5 has 1800, and when fully awakened that goes up to 2000. Next, we're going to be taking a look at the rage effects. So both of the rage skills deal a flat damage factor, but also have an additional effect. So Thaleia grants Rampage, which gives you a 15% all damage buff. This means that skill damage, normal attack damage, pet damage, and artifact damage are all increased. Gromara, on the other hand, just gives a skill damage boost. So if she isn't awakened, she gives a 10% skill damage boost, and when she is awakened, she gives a 25% skill damage boost. Now, one thing to note that is really important is that Gromara's buff counts as synergy. So you'll see here in this battle report, when Gromara casts her rage skill Rend Flesh, it says that the Legion gains synergy for the duration of battle. Now the reason that this is important is because there are other synergy buffs in the game in the talent trees. So if we take a look at Steady Hands here, this is one of the talents in the skills tree. This gives a 10% skill damage boost, which is a lot. However, it's synergy. So therefore, it will not stack when using a Legion with Gromara in it. Additionally, you will not be able to use Iconoclasm. Iconoclasm here doesn't specify synergy, as you can see. However, when you take a look at the report, you'll see that Iconoclasm triggers the synergy effect. Now, the reason that this is important is because many people choose to go the magic tree route in order to reach a higher movement speed on their march. You're going to be at a disadvantage if you go the Iconoclasm route. Next, we're going to be taking a look at passive skill damage. So both heroes have a skill that grants an additional skill damage buff. Thaleia's third skill grants a 20% skill damage boost, and Gromara grants a 15% skill damage boost in both the unawakened and awakened state. Next, both receive a 25% damage boost from their skills, and Thaleia will receive a 25% boost from her second skill, while Gromara will only receive a 20% boost. Lastly, both of them have a 20% attack mitigation, which means that when you're attacking a target, you're going to be taking less counterattack, and I believe you're also going to receive slightly less damage if you're hit. Now we're going to be taking a look at the talent trees that you can run. I went ahead and used the 21% talent tree build just to show the maximum amount of damage possible. So when using Yun Ming and Thaleia, you can grab Steady Hands, as I mentioned earlier, and you're able to get that 10% boost at near the end of the tree that you can see here. Now when using Ming with Gromara, you cannot choose Steady Hands, so you have to go with the hero's skill crit damage boost. And now the way that I calculated this 4.5% skill damage here is that let's assume that you have the focus, which is the 10% crit chance at all times, and you have a crit damage bonus of 45%. If we divide 45% by 10, assuming that you're going to crit once out of every 10 tries, that's going to be a 4.5% damage boost on average. So as you can see from here, when running Yun Ming with Thaleia, you can get 39% skill damage. And when you're running Yun Ming with Gromara, you get 30.5% skill damage. Okay, I know that this slide has a lot of information on it. I promise you it's not that confusing. It looks a lot worse than it actually is. So let's go through this one step at a time. So at the very top, we once again have the rage damage factor. This has not changed. Below it, we have the rage effect. Now for talents and passive skill, this is where I took the skill damage from the talent trees, and I also added the passive skill damage that we had from the previous slide. So Thaleia is going to get a passive skill damage boost of 20%, and Gromara is going to get a passive skill damage boost of 15%. So when adding those together, we get 59% skill damage boost for Thaleia, and we get a 45.5% skill damage boost for Gromara. Now, take note that I have not included the rage effect just yet, but we will be taking that into account further along in the damage times skill damage row. Now next, we got the Ming damage over 10 seconds. So this is the damage that Ming is going to do over 10 seconds when just hitting 2 targets and casting his 4th skill twice. Because Ming activates his awakening ability as soon as you start battle, you're not going to have that effect by the time that Thaleia and Gromara cast their rage skills. So I didn't want to include that in this calculation here. Yes, as you go further into battle and you trigger Ming's awakening again, then you do have a chance of lining these things up. But just to make things more simple, I stuck with 2 targets being hit by Ming's ability and assumed that we would trigger his 4th skill twice in those 10 seconds. So that Ming damage, once we take into account the diffuse damage, comes out to 2,550, which is the same for all 3 marches. But you'll notice that when Thaleia, his 4th skill will only do 900 damage factor. And the reason is that this damage scales based on the number of stacks of buffs that he has. Ming alone can only get 3 max stacks, which is why we have 900 here. And when using Gromara, we can get 5 stacks from her 4th skill, and that's why her damage factor is 1,250. Next, we look at the damage times skill damage percent row. So let's start by looking at Gromara's first, and then it'll be a little bit easier to understand what I did in Thaleia's column. So I went ahead and took the talents and passive skill of Gromara in the middle column, which is 45.5, and I added the 10% skill damage boost above it. So I went ahead and added up all of the damage. So I added Gromara's 1,800 damage factor from her own rage skill, and then I added Ming's damage, which is the 2,550 plus the 1,250. And together this adds up to 5,600, and we're going to be multiplying this by 155.5%. So we do 1.555, and this gives us a damage of 8,708. If we go ahead and look on the far right, we do the same thing. However, Gromara does have a higher damage factor at 2,000, and she has a skill damage boost from her rage effect of 25%. So we're going to be multiplying this by 170.5%, or 1.705. And this gives us a damage factor of 9,889. So now we go over to Thaleia. So Thaleia's rage effect actually only boosts the damage of Yun Ming. This is because the rage effect only lasts for 5 seconds, and so it will run out by the time Thaleia casts her next rage skill. So I am taking the 59% from talents and passive skill and multiplying that by the total damage factor, which once again includes Thaleia's rage skill and all of Yun Ming's damage, and that's 5,050 times 159%, and that gives us 8,029.5. Next, we're going to take just Yun Ming's damage once again, and we're going to multiply that by the 15%, and that gives us 517.5. Now, I don't know in what order these multipliers are added, because you're definitely going to have that skill damage boost increasing the damage, and then you're also going to have the rampage increasing that boost. And so that's what this third row within that box is, where I multiplied 3,450 by 159% and also an additional 15%. And that gives a damage factor there. You see 823, but I just went with the 517 to not overestimate her damage. Next, we're going to look at the artifact row. So like I mentioned, Rampage does boost the damage of the artifact. Now, when it comes to passive skill damage, over the course of those initial 10 seconds, they're all going to deal 600 damage factor. This is assuming that your Dragon's Fate is maxed. However, once you gain the Rampage ability from Thaleia, Yun Ming's next 3 casts are going to deal additional damage. So I went ahead and did 360 from the 3 casts, multiplied this by 115%. That gets us 414. So that's going to be an increase in damage of 54. And then below that, I included the damage of the active effect. If you manage to activate the active effect while you have the Rampage boost, you're going to be dealing 17,250 damage factor. And what I did then was I divided that damage factor by 9 because there is a cooldown of 90 seconds. And this will give you kind of an average damage per every 10 seconds. I know that the artifact is just cast once, but this is just to kind of give you an average and include it in this 10-second damage that we're comparing. So you can see that this is an additional 250 damage factor over the 1,666 that the Gromara March has. And so in this last row, we're adding up all of the damage. So with Thaleia, we're adding the 8,029.5, and then we're adding in the Rampage effect, which is the 517.5 additional damage. We're adding that little bit of damage from the artifact passive and also the amount from the artifact active effect. With Gromara in the middle column here, you see we did the exact same thing. This is just the damage times skill damage row plus the artifact damage, and we did the same thing with Gromara when she is fully awakened. So as you can see, the numbers are actually pretty close. Now, one thing to mention is that this bottom row is the total damage that does not include pet damage. Thaleia's Rampage effect will increase pet damage by 15%. So if you have a really strong pet, that's going to increase damage even more. Now, looking at these numbers, I feel I can confidently say that if your Gromara is not awakened, Thaleia is most likely the better choice for you, especially if you already have her. Once you factor in pet damage, I think that Thaleia is a clear winner over Gromara when she is 5-1-5-5. However, once Gromara is awakened, I'm going to say that Gromara is most likely the better choice here. Now, Thaleia could still potentially make up for the difference in damage by boosting pet damage. However, Gromara is going to be more consistent with the buffs that she gives the March. And the reason for this is that when Thaleia grants her Rampage effect, you have 5 seconds to take advantage of that effect. If you spend that time running away or not dealing damage, that timer is going to be ticking down, and that damage buff is going to go to waste. However, once Gromara casts her Rage skill, she keeps that buff permanently. So even when you're moving around kiting, as long as you don't end battle, you will retain that buff. So this chart is solely showing the maximum damage potential of each March. Now, once again, to summarize, I strongly believe that Thaleia at 5111 is going to be better than Gromara if your Gromara isn't awakened. But if your Gromara is awakened, then she will be better than Thaleia when pairing her with Yun Ming. Now, of course, if you want the best mage garrison in the game, then you'll probably want to get Gromara anyways. But if you already have Thaleia, then I don't think that you need to invest in Gromara. However, if you have not invested in Thaleia at all, maybe you're a newer player and G3 still hasn't come out yet, then it might be worthwhile to save your tokens and just save them for Gromara instead. However, one last thing that I want to leave you with. Just because an awakened Gromara might be better than Thaleia, that doesn't mean that you should still invest in Gromara. So I'm going to share an explanation that my friend Shelby shared with me. So let's take the average T5 COD player that maybe makes 20 merits in a season. If we go ahead and divide that by 5 for 5 marches, we're going to get 4 million merits per march. Now the thing is, Yun Ming is super cracked, and he can alone almost gain 50% more merits than your other marches. So let's say that Ming Thaleia is getting about 6 mil merits out of your 20 mil merits. Now let's say that Ming Gromara is better than Ming Thaleia by 20%. What we would go ahead and do then is we're going to multiply those 6 million merits by 120% or 1.2. That's going to give us 7.2 million merits. This is only a difference of 1.2 million merits. So instead of gaining 20 million merits in that season, you now gained 21.2 million merits. So you just invested 700 gold tokens into Gromara to gain a little over 1 million more merits in a season. Now, I don't know about you, but that's definitely not worth it to me. This is just an example and definitely not perfect, but it should give you something to think about. Now, at the end of the day, we can look at these numbers all we want, but ultimately, we need to see how these marches are performing in the open field. However, I personally will continue using Thaleia or Thundolin with Yun Ming, and for now, we'll continue holding off on Gromara. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions whatsoever, make sure to leave a comment below, message me in game, or you can message me on Discord. If you've seen any big mistakes or things that I did not consider in this video, let me know as well. And also let me know which of these two heroes you're going to be going with in the comments below. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.